All right, hi, this is Adam Asnes, and I'm here with my special guest, Anke Corbin of Globig. I'm with Lingoport, and we're here to talk with you a little bit about going to market. As our regular webinar attendees know, the whole Lingoport company is organized around software in terms of getting software ready to market and continuous localization. So software is always internationalized and localized. And if you're interested in that, just go to lingoport.com. You'll see lots of information on our products and services to help software companies bridge gaps to globalization, but also make it a really smooth, ongoing process from software development, ongoing development, localization, and QA so that all the software is globalized. All right, enough about me. We're here to talk about Anke Corbin. She founded and runs a company called Globig. It is the unusual situation that she's also right here in Boulder. She's become a friend of ours here at Lingoport, and she helps companies with everything that really is strongly matters around getting your products, getting your company to be a global company, and that encompasses a great deal. She's worked with a whole lot of companies. She's got a very able team with her. She works all the time. I would say she makes my life seem easy, and she will optimize marketing, sales, and customer success, your systems. There's so much involved with globalization that I almost go, whew, the internationalization, the localization is the easy part. Anyway, she's a bundle of energy, and she needs to be. I bring you Anke Corbin. Anke, if you just want to say hello.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be really fun. I look forward to sharing just some of the things that we've learned along the way.
All right, I'm realizing that I have control of the PowerPoint, so you'll have to tell me if I need to move on. But I think I've got it.
Okay.
All right. So with that, we're going to have a bunch of questions that I'm going to ask Anke, and then again, to just repeat myself from before I hit the recording button, if the audience has questions, please write them down in the Q&A interface and go to meeting. And we will get to them at the end of our presentation. I generally like to take all questions until we start to run real over, and then, if there's any leftover questions, we'll still get to them, but just probably privately. All right, here we go. Why this subject matter? This actually kind of lit my fire a little while ago, talking with a company that's a current customer of ours. They paid us a lot of money to internationalize a very large SaaS application, and they also license our software ongoing. And in talking with some of their development executives, their company went through being bought a couple of times in the last couple of years, not once, but twice. I wouldn't wish that on any team, but it does happen. And so their marketing efforts got lost. Their software was ready, but for them, they had really just under 100 new customers in this global audience that they had prepared for, which certainly wasn't anywhere close in their case for their break-in. Sometimes a company will have like one customer and that's enough, but we'll talk about that later and why that's short-sighted also. But it pained me. It pains me. Now they're restarting that effort, so it's not such a sad story. It's good that they're prepared for that. But I want companies to have really strong marketing success. Obviously, if you're going to go through the pain to localize your software and go through all the re-engineering and all the continuous systems enablement, it's just really good to have the rest of the business case in line. Because remember, nobody really globalizes just because it's cool, and it is cool, but people do it all for the business case. So with that, Anke, do you have anything to add to that, or?
No, not yet. I'll just we'll just start with the kind of the processes and the things that we want to consider.
Good, good. So, okay, I'm a C-level person, and somebody's come to me and said, you know, we really ought to go to XYZ company, you know, or maybe I'm a CEO and I've been to a conference and everybody was global except me, and I'm like totally embarrassed, right? Because that happens also. Or maybe I've already been a global company, but you know, we've really just dabbled in it and we need to get better at it. Or maybe we're even experienced, because experienced companies have problems too. All right. Okay. Let's, without me reading these aloud, because I think everybody can read, why don't you go through how you might get started with people?
Sure. One of the things that we've learned is it's really important to have a process for choosing where to go if you can, as well as a process for how to get there, how to grow. And we've sort of documented over time the kinds of considerations that you have, you know, as a company. So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about what might that look like. So we created this super simple guide, and I want you to know that if anyone would like to reach out to me at some point, I'm happy to share all of our resources and the sorts of things that we go through when we're exploring. I'm also going to make an assumption that most of you are already doing some business internationally, and maybe a handful of you are still considering or looking at a new country. When you first decide on a target market, it's more than just an emotional decision. It's more than just a, hey, I really like this place. It's more of a, how can we do business there? And there are these things that you want to evaluate. Best practices would include that you look at market stability, the rule of law, how easy is it to do business there, and there's all sorts of things under that. What are the HR considerations if you plan on building out a team in that country? Can you get product market fit? Is there already a process or a way that people do business where yours will fit in? And do you have any sort of competitive advantage within that is meaningful, right? What are some of the internal company considerations? Like, do you have the bandwidth? Do you have the champions? Do you have the senior executive support? Like, all of those really, really matter, because it can't just be one person, you know, waving the flag and charging through. It takes everyone to do this well, because there are components for all of this, whether it's, you know, the product team or the HR team or the finance team or the sales team, the marketing team. Everyone has a role to play, and it's really important that everyone's on board. And then if you really are planning on building out your business in that country, what are the characteristics around quality of life? Can you attract the right people? Can you bring your teams over there to build it and keep them there? Or are they going to, you know, are they going to thrive? Or is their partner, significant other, and family, are they going to thrive? Or are you going to, you know, 6 months later, everything blows up because they all want to come back home? Those are really, really important considerations. And there are a lot of those, and I've seen all of it. I'll tell some stories around, you know, everything can look fantastic, and we've had companies that have had some executives go over, and one of their family members needed a certain medication that they couldn't get in that country, and they weren't able to bring it in. They all had to pack up and leave within weeks, right? Those sorts of things cost companies so much money, or they weren't able to get their children into the schools that they wanted. Again, fully disruptive in this process. So there's so many things to consider, and being prepared and having a plan is a whole lot better. And yet there'll still be these unforeseen things that happen, but for the most part, if you can plan and support and really think through all of these components. I have another wonderful story about a company that spent maybe a year, 2 years planning about an international expansion. Everything was ready to go, and really within the last few months, right before they were ready to launch, they recognized that their business model and their opportunity and the way that they actually grew their business in the, you know, in the country that they were based wasn't even allowed in the country that they were planning to go to. So 2 months, 3 months before they were ready to go, after spending probably millions of dollars and thousands of man hours, they pulled the brakes because all of a sudden everything kind of changed. And this doesn't happen just to small companies. This happens to large companies. You see all sorts of case studies on the internet, whether it's Target or Walmart or Starbucks or, I mean, you name it, Home Depot in China. Everyone could have this happen to them. And a lot of it has to do with just this one piece missing, right? Home Depot in China, they didn't realize that Chinese didn't want to do it themselves, and that a DIY approach actually was symbolic of being poor, and what they were all being, they were becoming middle class and upper class, and their goal was to have someone else do it for them. So Home Depot couldn't even get their big box stores to work, no matter what they did. So these are real life stories, and then these things could be happening to you as well because of one major thing that just wasn't planned for and wasn't considered. So those are the sorts of things that we think about and try to plan for. Let's go to the next thing. When you go international, it's usually for 3 different reasons. We see that with companies, and we'll talk about that in a second. But when you are in a country, or when you're going into a country, there's like 4 different stages, and this is sort of our process for going international. We consider the stage of expansion. Each one of them will have a different process. We consider sort of the assessment process, what we call around the 5 Ps, core drivers of success. Each department has their own version of this, so we really map out and go through the different core drivers of success for each one of these, and everyone has a role to play, and every company has criteria that are going to become really, really important to them. But I think what's unique about how we approach it is we then apply what we consider kind of lean startup methodology. There's a whole lot of unknowns, and there's a whole lot of data that you don't have yet. So how do you get that? And how does each one of your team members get this? And even at a growth stage, we try to look at what are those things that we have to know and we have to test as quickly as possible, so that we can then learn from that and iterate and get closer and closer and closer to being really good at something, right? And it's funny, I know a lot of you think, well, we do that with our company here, or we do that when we launch a product. But I'm always surprised at how all these best practices and these approaches, they sort of get thrown out the window when someone's expanding into a new country, right? That whole approach of how do I validate? How do I prove if I have product market fit? How do I test if I can actually get my idea to take hold? What are those things that I have to know? What's the information that I just can't do business without, and how do I get that, right? How do I get it fast? How do I iterate quickly? How do I test? And how do I do it lightly, so that you don't go all in, you build the big office, you have the big plans. Test everything, right? Test, learn, iterate, move fast, and you will get there so much quicker if you just keep those best practices that you have in your DNA here in the United States or wherever you are, and apply that also to your international expansion. And if you don't have this approach here, it's probably something to consider, because you'll learn and you'll do any unknown situation is going to benefit from using this sort of an approach. So this is sort of how we kind of think about growth. We think about launching, like pretty much every stage. There are these very specific things that you want to be doing just for success, and it makes a big difference. So why don't we jump over to the next slide? I want to make sure that I give you plenty of time to ask questions as well. There are usually these 3 components to going internationally, and we've talked about this a few times, Adam, where companies will either be chasing a sale, so there's this amazing single market opportunity, and they really hadn't thought about international expansion, or especially a country maybe that they had really never considered, but it is an amazing opportunity, and so everyone's super excited about it. That's all right. That's a process. It's probably not the ideal process, but it happens time and time again. So then, go with that, but recognize that you have to do all those other things that we talked about on the slide before. That entire process, you're going to have to backfill that, because you don't want only that one major client in a country, because if things don't go well, if IP is questionable, or if there's some trust issues that happen, which I've seen every imaginable version of, don't assume that that one relationship's going to make or break everything, right? So fill in behind it, fill in with your good processes, fill in with your market opportunity, build, the infrastructure to do a really good job within that country behind chasing that sale, right? So that's an okay way to expand, not ideal, but it works. The other one that I see a lot is competitive pressures. Companies not ready, hadn't really been thinking about it, but their competitors are expanding, and they're going to have these, benchmarks in all these different countries, and you're going to be behind, right? That is another real situation. So we saw that with SendGrid, for example. SendGrid, when it was way early on, and I was talking to Jim Franklin, who at that time was the CEO, and he had mentioned that, they weren't fully ready to be expanding into a lot of countries, especially all the littler European countries and countries that they just hadn't had on their roadmap, but they were getting tremendous competitive pressure to be there. And so what they decided was, instead of building out full offices, they looked at, putting community managers and champions and developer events into a number of countries. It was sort of a way of managing it. It was a way of having a footprint without having a fully developed plan behind it. It made them look like they were really active in those communities, because again, it was all about developer relationships, and because they had these really strong community managers in there, it felt to other competitors that they already were in those countries and well established, and they were actually able to kind of push out and stave off some of the competitive challenges that they had, and it allowed them to build it behind that, right? So kind of go a little bit more strategic behind it, because it looked like they were really well established already. And he said that that was a really, really smart move on their part, because otherwise they would have not, they would have allowed all the competitors to really build their businesses behind, and they just would have been the last one in the market. So instead, in a number of markets, they ended up being first and having a presence, but not a really fully developed presence, a light presence, a testing presence, but it was very powerful for them. The third,
I'm going to add,
go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just going to add to that experience. Just in our business, we do have people. I mean, most of our clients are pretty well established global brands worldwide. I mean, you would recognize most of our client list if I said their names out loud. But there will also be companies that come to us really because they want expert help, and they will be like, well, we have this, customer that's going to close like right away, and they're big, and they're in China, or they're in Japan, or something like that. And like this happens everywhere, but in particular places, it's like the timeline of expectation is just very, very different. So close right away doesn't usually mean like sometimes even this year.
No, it might mean years of things. And frankly, I think that's actually okay. So think about China. You had mentioned China. Well, if you're thinking about rolling out into China, and even if you have a really good relationship, and like you said, that pull from this really great partner, there's some things that you have to have in place beforehand. Things like trademarking, and things that take more than a year to implement that are going to protect you in the long run, right? So you don't actually want to push so fast that you make mistakes and that you overlook things that will protect your company over time, right? You have to consider the IP situation, and especially because your work is with software companies, you know, we all know that that's a challenge, and you have to think about, is that relationship going to protect me? Can we do something in the long term? I think you should assume that fast is 2 years, right? Or 1 year, maybe. That's like super fast. And that's including European countries. You could go faster, but again, you're not protecting yourself. You wouldn't have been able to do the due diligence that you need to do. And you probably don't have the infrastructure in place. So
the fastest I saw was for a financial client of ours that basically somebody sold something, and so it was a complete panic on the keyboards, and you know, we had to do a staged release of their product for I think it was for like just for the Brazilian market, and it was something like 3.5 months from start to first version of a globalized product, which is really unusually fast for a sophisticated SaaS-based application. I wouldn't recommend that. I mean, we literally said, okay, what's the minimum viable product that we can release in this country to solve the contract limitation rather than the what you'd want to do. You know what I mean? And that's another decision, like how much, but that's less important. That's almost like a product scoping process rather than a go-to-market strategy. Anyway, I cut you off. Do you have anything more for this slide?
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, and I think that the ideal type of expansion is where you really are planning it out, right? So that's the strategic expansion. And even if the other two are your kind of pull into that market, you can then build the strategy behind it, build in behind it. You're going to have to do that at some point. I mean, I've even seen companies where the reason that they went into the country was because the CEO wanted to be in the south of France, right? So that's a
smart CEO. I like going to the south.
I think it sounds really awesome too, but it means that the rest of the company then needs to build the infrastructure behind it, right? So that ultimately the strategy runs the business, even if it wasn't the initial reason for going into that country. And I get it. I wouldn't mind that either. So.
All right. Here we go. Oh, here we're talking about things going wrong.
And things do go wrong sometimes. And you know what? It's just like our business here. There are challenges. There are things. There are hiccups, and you know, things didn't go quite as well, or it's costing a lot more. We should all assume, just like building a house, that it's going to take 2-3 times longer than you think, and 2 to 4 times more money than you think. And so be prepared for that, and you've got lots of unknowns. Here's the part that gets challenging. I think every company realizes that it might take longer and it might cost more. What they don't think about is sometimes it doesn't work the way you thought. And the areas that we see being kind of the key drivers of challenges are often around culture, right? And just not completely understanding how things work in a culture. I can share an example. There was a company that they were going into some European markets. They wanted to go into one market because they felt like it was a really great software development market, and they could also pull really great engineers in that area. They found it to be a little bit expensive, so what they also did was kind of look at surrounding countries, and they thought, you know what, if we actually just moved our office into what we would call like a midpoint, we could, because we're, you know, this really awesome company, we have really great benefits, we pay very well, we could probably attract engineers from these other countries, bring them in, and we could pay a lot less in that area. And, you know, that was really their approach. Well, what they didn't recognize was culturally, People don't move from their families in some of these countries, in most of these countries. It's not like it is here in the United States where someone's willing to pack up and move their family. I mean, it's just not. Culturally, that doesn't work that way. And so they weren't able to attract the talent that they thought. They weren't able to pull from all those regions. They ended up closing that office and having smaller offices in the locations where they wanted to build out their development teams, and that was how they had to solve that. But it was a misstart, right? It cost them money, it cost them time, it was probably really discouraging, and they had to really think about it. So we see a lot of mistakes around culture. We see a lot of mistakes around understanding the regulatory environment, especially data privacy and the sorts of business that they can do in each of those countries, and even just the requirements around documentation, and there's a lot of complexity there. We see mistakes around business model acceptance, and I had talked about a company where they didn't even realize that their approach to growth wasn't a viable business model, and now there are other ways to grow for them, but they just weren't prepared for that, so they had to put everything on hold. I had just mentioned about some of the hiring challenges. Hiring is a really big deal, and other countries take hiring a whole lot more serious than we do. And so there's no messing around with this, whether it's the regulations around it, the expectations around it, just hiring is tough, and it's tough around the world. Talent is tough, as we all know. It's getting harder, as a matter of fact. Go to market isn't as easy always. You always think, oh my gosh, we're gonna do all the same things we do here, we're really good. Well, that's not necessarily how go-to-market works in those countries. The other thing, this is an interesting one, is the last 6 years there have been some politically charged events all around the world. There's a lot more around looking internally to your own country, being proud of your own country, wanting to get things from your own country, so sort of a nationalistic approach. That's real, right? So this sense of, we're this company, we're big and powerful, and we're going to go somewhere. There's this sense of arrogance that doesn't always work. I think that you have to recognize that these things will really impact your go-to-market and impact your ability to do business. And so going in with this attitude of we know what we're doing is actually a really dangerous attitude. We always recommend, yes, expertise is critical, but humility and approaching it that way, and just wanting to learn with this open mind and asking a lot of questions and starting smaller and allowing the market to lead and allowing the country's DNA to start infusing yours at a local level, that actually makes a really, really big difference. And then the other area I see lots of mistakes happening is that there's not enough market validation done at the early stage. There's just this assumption that you can just replicate what you're doing and it's all going to be okay. And those things really you could have done. We can all do that, and I know we've made those mistakes within our own businesses. Lots of assumptions and maybe not enough conversations with prospective clients and current customers, and those are.
Well, along those lines, with particularly with software, you can actually see where visitors to your application are coming from. Where are people logging in from in many cases? So, what I've seen is that sometimes a globalization decision is basically made because of that, or say, hey, we're going to localize for this market because we have a lot of interest here. Let's go a little bit beyond that interest. How do you cultivate from interest to now we're going to really ramp this up?
Because there is a difference
I'm putting
between
you on
those.
The spot. We didn't discuss this customer.
No. There's a difference between the customers that have been naturally attracted and then all of a sudden taking that and then growing that, right, and figuring that out. I think every country is going to be different. So let's just take Germany is a great example because it's a country that there's a lot of market opportunity, and software companies really like the idea of capturing it. Germany has this really interesting thing, is that expertise is really important. You know, they don't really believe in influencer. They're not particularly active in a lot of social channels, right? So taking those companies that are already using your software and asking them, you know, and inviting them to share with their network, figuring out like what is the network that they belong to, because that is gold. Right? The fact that you already have someone that's using your product as a champion, that's so incredibly valuable. And so that to me is where you start, is what do they look like? What is it that made them want to use you? Learning about that and then figuring out how do you take that and replicating that is an amazing place to start. That's actually a gift that not every company has. Right? Just start where you're at and then start building it out from there. And can you, right? Are there hundreds and thousands more that look just like the companies that are using you, and figuring out like why did they choose you without you even having to do, you know, a whole lot of marketing and a lot of market development for it. That's the key information, I think. And then looking at how do you do more? How do you do a lot more of that? What does that look like? And it's not advertising. It's not your traditional marketing. It's very much relationship building, belonging to the associations and the organizations and the things that are already in existence, because that's how you build in a German culture, is that relationship building, that trust building. And sometimes those things take a lot of time. So, you know, make sure that you have that time to know that you need to build that. But I say start where start somewhere you've already got a foot in. How do you take that? And are they happy enough with your product to where they're willing to open other doors? That's a pretty amazing test, right? Could you ask and learn from that? COVID's been really tough for companies because of that, right? You don't have nearly the opportunities of going over there and building those relationships. So I think that more and more companies right now, more executives have been open to very genuine conversations, and then asking for, you know, if you ask for help, they will give it, because they're also doing that with other, you know, not with other relationships.
Right. Okay. Let's whoops. Sorry. There we go. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit more about what can possibly go wrong. You know, like how do you know trouble is brewing, and how do you kind of get yourself out of that? How do you kickstart yourself out, and what data should you be tracking? So pretty loaded question.
There's a lot here, and it's not that simple, but the things that I think are some indicators are growth can be both this is normal, or growth can be this isn't normal, right? So really understanding your growth metrics and your expectations as to why are you not growing the way that you're growing? Is that because you just underestimated how long it was going to take? Or is it because you can't tell the story correctly? Or is it because you can't get the interest and excitement? So I think you have to really dig into your sales and marketing and just general growth metrics, because that's either, you know, just a reality check or an indicator of where there's some challenges. A couple of other things are around if people are moving jobs, if it's hard to hire, and because you're not attracting the talent, or the talent is moving, or they're not willing to share with their network and bring in other people. So there's a really, really good indicator there. Like, I think one of the first areas you can always tell when things aren't as healthy as they should be is in your kind of hiring processes, and also within the employee base. Like, are there a lot of HR challenges? You know, are people happy there, or are they just not? And that's, culturally, are they fitting in? Is there a lot of conflict between headquarters and the satellite offices or people that are over there? That's an area that I see where a lot of recognition is. The other thing is are you able to are you able to take the product and make it work there? Like, are people using it? Is it getting the usage that you had anticipated? Are those metrics similar to what you're seeing in others? Is there value there, or enough value that you're seeing, right? So those are the sort of areas that you want to be tracking, not unlike what you're tracking currently, but you should be able, are you getting the renewals that you had anticipated, right? It's just your general business metrics, but to me, it's like the culture metrics and the growth metrics where you can see when things aren't going as well. So renewals and new business and hiring, that's where I think you can kind of see where what's going on, and you at least get kind of trend indicators. And if those continue to go in the direction that they're at, most people jump ship, or you really can tell when things aren't very healthy, not going the way that you want, because people get discouraged after a while if there's things aren't moving in the right direction.
All right, this is the last question, and I think we're going to audience Q&A, so get ready, audience. All right, so what are some tips for expanding more affordably? And then let's end with let's end on a good note. We've been talking about what goes wrong. Let's talk about success, a good success story.
Sure. So the ways that you can expand more affordably are to not do them at the kind of most expensive extreme level. Like, don't immediately go in with the full office, right? Could you do a lot of your testing and a lot of the things? Could you do it with a sales executive, like a sales representative from someone else? Could you do it where you don't actually have a person in that market? Could you do it with instead of hiring yourself could you do it with a PEO firm where the set up and you don't have to put the full business entity in? As far as your product goes, does it have to be fully localized, or can it be localized to a point where it's functional, right? But can you still consider you doing business in English? Maybe not. What do you have to make it work? I mean, I just am saying for the initial test, right? You're going to have to go fully local. And that's actually going to be what my success story is all about, is if you don't commit to the market, you won't have success. Ultimately, you just won't. But I'm just saying, like, how do you get there? How do you get your data? How do you test? Those are just the sorts of things that we think about. Like, what's your lightest footprint? What is MVP? And when I say MVP, I never think of it as minimum viable. I think of it as like more MDP, minimum delightful product. What does it look like for you to delight without, do you need every feature and everything? Maybe, but maybe you need the core and you need that done really, really well. But ultimately, my biggest thing is if you're not committed, and if you're not willing to give it the 5-10 years that it's going to take to really understand and get fully immersed in a market, it's going to be pretty hard to succeed, because they feel it. Everyone knows that you're just not committed, and there's not a whole lot of business they want to do with companies that are not committed. A success story is, so we work with a company, their goal, it was actually the other way around. It's a European company that wanted to come into the US market. We have all those same challenges, is that they went through several years, lost salespeople back and forth because they just weren't getting the traction that they thought they should and that they wanted to get. And what happened is that they just didn't feel like they were committed to the market. They weren't local. And so what we did, worked with them on, was sort of regrouping, picking an area and really becoming part of the community, right? Getting to understand and know the companies before trying to sell to them, being part, creating events that had value, whether it was roundtable discussions, whether it was meetup events, co-creating content and podcasting, and really developing real relationships, understanding, and having a real commitment in the market. And that opened up so many business opportunities for them that then the sales actually started becoming real. And the same thing happens to you. What is it going to take for you to be a local? What is it going to take for you to be committed to a country, and to know that if you aren't committed, if you don't understand them, if you don't give them a sense that you really believe in their way of doing business and who they are, why would they work with you, right? There's usually an alternative, a local alternative. You're going to have to be a whole lot better than that local alternative, because everyone wants to work with a local first. So how do you do something so much better than what the alternatives are? How do you feel local? And that's all about what we've been talking about with localization, right? How do you do that? That's when you will see whether you can have the success that you can have. You can't do it by just pretending or not committing. It's just not going to work for you.
All right, that's very good. All right, well, we're going to go on to audience questions now. I've put up some contact information if anybody wants to connect with any of us. I neglected to put my own LinkedIn information, but I have a pretty unique name in most social media, so I'm pretty easy to find.
Yeah, I want to share too. I have a bunch of resources. Please do reach out if you'd like the evaluator, if you'd like our Lean International Expansion Framework. It's so helpful because all of a sudden everyone sees what they actually have to do to prepare, or even to backfill when you're there, and really build that solid strategy. So, feel free to reach out. I would be happy to share, even if you just want to chat. So I'd love to get to know you.
Okay, we've got some questions coming in here, so that's great. I'm going to get to them right now, and I really appreciate. I know one of the things that at least many of our company globalization executives have to fight is really a battle to get budget, battle to get company mind share and focus. Sometimes that battle is with the C-suite, sometimes it's with software engineers. Software engineers, once they get turned on to globalization, I found that they actually really dig it, but they need systems to make that less burdensome. Anyway, here we go. I'd love to hear more about the time to market. Are the lead times you cited the minimum required for successful execution?
So I had talked about what are the things you have to do before you even go, right? So making sure that you're trademarking and all of your kind of the business components are ready. Go to market is different. Once you are ready to go, and let's say you figured out, are you going to have a business entity or not, or all your banking requirements, all of those things are going to take some time too. And in parallel, you can be building out your go-to-market plan and all of the components. So I think that they're all not necessary, they're not linear and they're not sequential, they're actually in parallel. You can go to market lightly, but I always believe in preparing before you are even going to market, just like you would here. How can you become someone that is known as an expert in that market? How can you start meeting the people that matter? How can you start understanding the market? So I think that there's at least a 6-month preparation time that I would recommend in advance of, and just like, how do you start talking about things in the market? How do you start participating in the conversations? How do you start figuring out who matters, whose opinions matter, and how do you start building those relationships so that when you are ready to actually go into that market, it's not fully cold and you're not just starting from ground zero. You already are a part of that community, even if you were just listening and just lightly commenting or just connecting. So I actually think you have to prepare in advance at least 6 months. Ideally is a year. You can go faster, and I've seen companies do that, but that same ramp up period is going to take you quite a bit of time to get the traction that you want.
Okay, very good. There's one person who wrote a couple of times that they couldn't hear. Hopefully they were able to. I can hear you fine. I think most people, I'm hoping that everybody could. All right. What does LIEF or LEAF stand for? Did I miss that? And for anybody, like if we turn this into a podcast, it was in one of the graphics on one of the slides.
It's Lean International Expansion Framework. It's really the framework for all the different departments for putting together a strategic international expansion. And so we trademarked LEAF and the Lean International Expansion concept, but it's our internal approach, if you will, our system for really thinking through and making sure that everyone has their plan and recognizes their role in this really exciting and wonderful process.
All right, so that was Lean International Expansion, and what was the last?
Framework.
Framework, thank you. I'm writing that down. All right, and I presume that you've got like white papers on this or something on
I do. I have all sorts of things I'm happy to share with you. So.
Okay. All right. That is the question list that we have going once, twice. Anyone else have a question? All right. Anke, I want to say thank you very much. This was a really fun webinar to do. It's a little different than the usual quasi-technical webinar that we often offer. But like I said, this is, you know, the other side of the product development that has to happen, and it really sets the table for success. Without what you do, Anke, it just doesn't really happen. It doesn't sustain, is what I say. So
it's where things fall down, right? You can have like everything be perfect and you've buttoned everything up, and all of a sudden you're just not growing, or you're not able to get the traction that you needed or wanted. And so there's so many things to consider, and you can have success, and I know you will. So I'm excited to see what you're doing out there. And, you know, again, please do reach out, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. I'm also going to say it's really hard. You know, given that there's all, it's like the Hydra, you know, you like chop one thing down and you got it, another head, two more heads spurt.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, very good, Anke. Thank you very much. I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. Thanks for joining us. I know there's a lot tugging on your sleeve to join online meetings, but quite a few of you did. So take care. And we'll look for another, I'm hoping to have a really cool guest on translation memory for our next, machine translation, because so much is developing in our industry around that and processes around that, that I'm hoping to have that together either probably early November. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.